Welcome to episode 40 of the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast. This is a celebration of the Hartford Whalers' third annual reunion coming up on July 12 and 13, 2019, as hosted by the Hartford Yard Goats baseball team. The key event for hockey fans will be the on-field barbecue on the afternoon of the 13th. This is a great way to meet the Whalers and hear some unforgettable hockey stories while enjoying great food and one of America's great minor league ballparks. Today's show features conversations with Yard Goats assistant GM Dean Zappalorti, a diehard Whalers fan who coordinates the event, and 4 Whaler reunion attendees, Mike Rogers, Jordy Douglas, Wayne Babych, and Andre Lacroix, all of whom share memories of their days with the Whalers. By the way, all of these comments are excerpted from previous editions of the PHA podcast. Now, let's talk classic hockey with your Hartford Whalers. Well, today we welcome to the show, as we talked about in the open, Dean Zappalorti, the Assistant General Manager of the Hartford Yard Goats baseball team. So why is he here on a Whalers show? And the reason is that Dean, of course, is coordinating for the third consecutive year the Whalers reunion weekend with the Hartford Yard Goats. So, Dean, thanks so much for being with us, and thanks so much for keeping the Whalers top of mind.
Mark, it's a pleasure. It's a labor of love for me. I always say I'm a hockey guy working in baseball.
Well, you can tell, Dean. So when the Whalers were in Hartford, I'm assuming that you were a fan of the team growing up.
Yeah, I was. I played youth hockey growing up, and that extended into a beer league as an adult. So, again, hockey's always been a big part of my life, and I grew up watching the Whalers. I'm 53 years old, so I am old enough to have seen the Whalers in the 70s, 80s, and as an adult, I had my own season tickets in the 90s. So, was able to appreciate, their entire history here.
What was your favorite memory of being a Whalers fan?
Well, there's a couple. The All-Star game that Hartford hosted was pretty neat, and then obviously I'm a Whalers fan. I was a hardcore Whalers fan, always rooting for them, but I'm a hockey guy. So, what I enjoyed about being a fan is, being able to see the greats come through our barns. So
right.
Whether it was Gretzky or Lemieux, Paul Coffey, Lindros for a while, just to watch all the greats playing in front of you was always amazing to me. You're just seeing the world's best.
Yeah, you noted that 1986 All-Star extravaganza, and just as you said, what I used to always tell people is just that feeling of having the best of the best come through Hartford, Connecticut, and being a major league city for that time stretch was very memorable, very important. Hartford was always an underdog city, and I always took a lot of pride when we'd play the Bruins and beat them. We'd beat them 10-2 one night back in '87, and I'd get a chance because they were on Sports Channel at the time, so everybody in Boston could watch the Whalers. And so, tell me a little bit about, I guess you kind of touched on a little bit about, so 3 years ago you came up with this event. And first of all, I just want to say for the fans who haven't partaken in the Hartford Yard Goats experience, it's truly exceptional. Beautiful ballpark, incredibly cooperative staff. Everything from the merchandise, the concessions is first rate, first class, clean as a whistle, and it's a great experience. Aside from the fact that, of course, now you have an event where you get to see and talk to over 20 former Whalers in a relaxed atmosphere. But what was your original inspiration behind this event?
Well, it was never really that much of a leap, to be honest. I think that, the Hartford Yard Goats blue and green are the Whalers blue and green. So we've paid homage to the Whalers in selecting our team colors. And so in that sense, we've always been keenly aware of the Whalers' history, I think clearly, I'm from here, grew up with the Whale, and I work here. Some of the other people are, and some are not from here, so they don't have that same attachment. But I guess I rubbed off on them in some capacity, and so they could tell my passion when talking about the Whalers, and so they bought into it, and it really wasn't a hard sell. And so that's how it started. They said, Dean, have at it. And I'll tell you, it's just been such a treat that I've been able to forge friendships with the guys that I grew up watching. And, some of the nicest guys. I always say, I've been working in sports and entertainment for 20 years in different fields, basketball, baseball, etc. But I just think the hockey guys are some of the nicest bunch of guys, and I don't know if it's because the bulk of them are Canadian. I really haven't been able to put a finger on it, but Mark, they're just truly good, salt-of-the-earth people, and I can now say 3 years later that, I stay in touch with many of them year-round, wish them a Merry Christmas or whatever it may be. So for me, it's really a treat.
Right, and you kind of became the de facto steward of the Whalers tradition at Hartford. So, there was a void there, and you were able to fill it. And the players, we'll be listening to a few of them later in the show, truly love coming back and being part of it. As I said before, it's a first-class night, and I was happy to participate in it last year. It's very relaxed. I guess that's the word for both the fans and the players involved. Yeah. It's a very fun, low-key atmosphere, but at the same time, the stories and the camaraderie, it all comes flooding back. When you see these guys, they truly enjoy it, so that says a lot for yourself. The one part of this I wanted to focus on today, and it's really a 3-day event, along with the Yard Goats and everything, but the luncheon that you have on Saturday the 13th, the barbecue, the baseball part of it, that was my favorite part of it, because I had a chance just to get out there in the field, talk to old friends. Beautiful day out. I'm sure it will be again on the 13th. And
right.
That's talk a little bit about that. I know there's a charity element involved in that, but talk a little bit about
Sure.
that special time period.
Yeah, so, our first year, we had the charity luncheon in a more formal setting, seated dinners up in our YG club, which is very beautiful. But I think we switched it up last year, in year 2, and it really resonated with people. And so it gives people not only a unique way to get up close and personal and converse with, the Whalers that they watched growing up, but it's pretty fun and unique. You get to go in the Yard Goats dugout and hang out, have some barbecue, some food and beverage. We have soda, water, beer, and wine. We have the pitching machine set up on the mound in a batting shell, so you could take some swings on a professional ball field. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, for 2 years running, we were voted the best AA ballpark in the country. So it's a rare opportunity that that people can actually come on the field, enjoy it, shag fly balls, take swings. Oh, and by the way, you can hang out with over 20 former Whalers, and at the end of it, there's an autograph session, and we have an exclusive poster that we've made that will only be available at this charity luncheon. All of the proceeds benefit the Yard Goats Foundation, which goes to help primarily Hartford-based causes and charities. So it's a good cause, it's a good time, and I think we found something here with the on-field barbecue that we're going to stick with for a long time.
Yeah, I can personally attest to it that it's such a fun time, and if you're a Whalers fan, if you're a hockey fan, or you just want to be part of a of a real nice afternoon and hear some of the best stories you'll ever hear in your entire life. You cannot. Now, this show, we hear a lot of stories, but there's nothing like the informal attitude, maybe a little beer and wine mixed in. But the stories that you'll hear as a fan, you have access to players. Like I said, it's first class, but you have that access, and you'll have a very memorable hockey experience, and I highly recommend it. Dean, in closing, how can fans get more information or get tickets to the Saturday afternoon event or any event they want to take part of this weekend?
Yeah, so you can go to yardgoatsbaseball.com, and in the right margin, there is a button to click for purchasing of the charity luncheon tickets. Again, I would be remiss if I did not mention that all of this is sponsored by UConn Health and has been for ever since day one that we've been doing this. So they're a great partner, and about 8 of the guys, we're going to do a hospital visit Friday, July 12th, and cheer up some people in the hospital, and then Saturday is the luncheon, and then Saturday night is the game. So if you go to yardgoatsbaseball.com, you can find out all the information about the Whalers Alumni Weekend.
That's great. Well, Dean, you're a good guy and all-around great pro, and we just want to thank you for, again, keeping the Whalers tradition alive in Hartford and putting on this great event, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the weekend, July 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right, Dean. Take care. Bye-bye.
You got it.
Former Whalers captain Mike Rogers was our guest on episode 30 of the podcast, and in this clip he talks a little bit about the magical 79-80 season where he topped the 100-point mark, combined with Blaine Stout and Pat Boutette to form one of the great NHL lines of that season.
Yeah, it was just, actually I started that season with Mark and Gordy on my wings, and what a thrill for me, the first game in the National Hockey League, and I look over to my left side, I've got Mark Howe, and then I look over to the right side, I'm going, oh, Gordy Howe, this, I think I finally arrived. This is pretty darn good. And I just remember, I can't remember who we were playing, but it was a game where just kind of, there was some line matching going on, and our coach said that, we're going to just, you and Blaine play together, and I can't remember even who was on the left side, but, you talk about instant chemistry, and it was, and, we never kind of missed a beat. I still remember that first shift, and Blaine knew the type of player I was, and I knew exactly what he expected, and we just hit it off right off the bat, and it was just amazing what we were able to accomplish in such a short period of time. And then, Mark, you mentioned Pat Boutette came over, and he was exactly what Blaine and I needed, because we weren't the most physical guy, and both of us weren't that enamored with going in the corner, so we had this this nonstop guy just going from corner to corner, digging pucks out, and Patty had a lot more skill than people gave him credit for. So the three of us just clicked right off the bat, and just had a phenomenal year.
It must have been great to, as a team, just to go out there and prove yourself and WHA that you guys could compete at the National Hockey League level. And as I said, certainly as a fan, it was an exciting year. You guys had a terrific team, but things don't ease up for you the next year. 80-81, the Whalers struggled a little bit, but you are still at the top of your game. And Stashy, I think that was a year he held out a little bit at the beginning of the year. Comes back and picks up where he left off. You eventually become captain of the Hartford Whalers. You and I actually don't even remember the circumstances of you becoming captain. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, I believe Don Blackburn was our coach at the time, and Ricky Lee was injured, who had been the captain of the hockey club, and there was talk about, is he going to return, is he not going to return? So they kind of decided they had to find a captain, and instead of the coaching staff or the management picking the captain, they gave a vote to the players. And who would ever think that when you've got a room full of Dave Keons and Johnny McKenzie's and Gordy Howes and Mark Howes, that the players are going to elect you as the captain. And when it was announced, it was one of the greatest honors I've ever received. And just because of those people in the dressing room, what they'd accomplished. So here they picked this kind of young up-and-comer, I guess you could say, and allow me to be the captain of this team and of such great players.
Boy, I tell you what, it's got to mean, as you said, so much when your peers are the one choosing you. Nobody can talk about politics or anything like that. That's just that's right from the heart. So I didn't know that. That's great. One guy that you kind of crossed paths with a few times in your career, I wanted to ask you about just because he's so interesting and so colorful, was Nick Fotiu. Which you actually crossed paths with 3 different times, New England Whalers, Hartford Whalers, and then New York Rangers. What type of guy was Nick? Do you have any memories of Nick as a player?
Well, Nicky was my protector, and as you mentioned, Mark, 3 times we played on the same team, and God, I was so excited every time that I got to play with Nicky because I knew I had a guy that had my back, and not only my back, but every player on that team. And talk about a guy that came from a non-hockey background and just what he was able to accomplish. And we all know that he wasn't the most skilled player, but, you just loved having Nicky in the dressing room. He was a prankster. I'm sure you've heard many stories about him nailing guys' shoes to the floor or filling their helmets with shaving cream or whatever. It was endless with Nicky, but everybody became just that much closer as a team because of Nicky. He drew that into each and every player, and just it was great to have him around. And I can't say enough about what Nicky did for my career.
Jordy Douglas was our guest on episode 22 of the podcast, and in this clip we talk a little bit about his rookie season in the World Hockey Association and his first year in the NHL, where he scored 33 goals playing on the left wing with Dave Keon in the middle.
Yeah, for our first season opener was in Quebec, and I'm kind of the odd. In those days, the New England had 3 lines and 2 extra players. It's kind of the forward positions, and it was Gordie Howe and Jordy Douglas for the most part, filler 9 and filler 11, as he used to call us. And but they had me on the power play, and so my very first shift and my very first shot in Quebec was a goal. I scored a goal, and it was assisted by Gordie Howe. And I get the puck. I mean, literally, this all happened very quickly in the first period, and I've got this puck, and I can remember walking out of the arena, and Gordie's kind of, and again, I'm trying to figure out where I fit in all this, and he kind of snuggles up and he says, "Hey, you got your first goal. Good for you." He says, "That was my 2,500th assist." And I was gobsmacked, and I pulled the puck out of my pocket, and I go, "Do you want the puck?" and he couldn't stop laughing. Of course it wasn't, but it just totally floored me. But that you met Gord, right. What he was like, Gordy, and that was just, he'd had a great laugh at my expense, and I was laughing along with him. But yeah, that was my first outing, and then I remember getting rhubarbed by the guys. They consistently told me I was going to be the 80 goal scorer for the season. Wishful thinking, eh?
Going into that 79-80 season, it was a very interesting season in hockey. It was a very interesting season to be around the Hartford Whalers because there's some emotion there. You're going back into this NHL schedule. You've got Gordie coming back to the NHL at the age of 51. David Keon, of course, in his pushing 40 at that point. One game I always remember from that year, I think it was the most special game of the early Whaler years, was Halloween in Toronto. As you guys play the Maple Leafs, yep. Dave Keon returns home and he scores. Yep. Gordie scores. Tell me what that was like going back to the Maple Leaf Gardens with those two in tow.
Well, Mark, let me set this up a little bit, if you don't mind, because people have asked me this before, what was it like for all the guys, like this going to the NHL, and I always say, I didn't know any different. I didn't play in the NHL. I was just trying to better myself. I wanted to be a better player, and so wherever that league, wherever that took me, that's where I played. But for a lot of guys coming out of the WHA to the NHL, this was because for a lot of guys this was because they didn't get an opportunity at the NHL level previous. That's why they went to the WHA, made themselves there, and then then of course the NHL. So there was a lot of emotion. Guys were very emotional, older guys coming into the NHL. Okay, now someone like Dave and not so much Gordie Howe. He was such an aberration. I mean, he was just a fun-loving guy. Just played, didn't matter. It just didn't matter. He just played, but Dave Keown was and some of those older guys. Their loyalty they wore on their sleeves, and and they were proud. Dave was a proud Maple Leaf that things didn't turn out there. So and they would basically, as I understand it, told because he was just too old, and they let him go, and he was not, as it turned out. But for him to go back to Toronto and have success, not one day. I mean, he had success for a couple of years later in his, the first years of the NHL. Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, it was so emotional. It was electric. I mean, I've been in some buildings over my career that there's emotion, and then there's this form of electricity.
Right.
I think of that game with Dave, but I also think of the return of Gordie Howe to Detroit. Mm-hmm. That was emotional, but there was electricity in that building. I don't know how else to explain it. It was just so incredibly special, and just so much going on. It was almost like like a whirlwind, like a tornado. It was just everything was happening, and all good stuff. But for Dave to walk out of there and having scored a goal and prove that he could still play, and I couldn't imagine what that man felt. Basically, proving everybody in that in the owner's box wrong. It had to have been incredible for him too.
Wayne Babbage was our guest in episode 38 of the podcast. And in this clip, he talks about the trade that brought him from the Quebec Nordiques to the Hartford Whalers to join his brother Dave in the Whalers' memorable playoff run of 1986.
Then I remember breaking my hand in Quebec, and so we were playing back-to-back to Hartford. And I remember that afternoon, I just got back from shopping. I went and saw the doctor, got a cast put on my hand, and I remember getting the general manager of the Quebec Nordiques calls me at home, and I thought he was calling me just to see how I was doing. He says, Wayne, I think you're going to be pretty happy. I says, you're going to be playing with your brother. So I said, and that's probably all we were missing in Quebec was a defenseman like Dave. So we just moved you to Hartford. You're going to be playing with your brother there. So I said, okay. That was I thought you're inside me. I was thinking that you just phoned me to see how my hand was.
Oh, you're all right, exactly.
A couple of minutes later, I get a call from Emil Francis. I said, Emil, I said, we talked, and I mean, he was my general manager in St. Louis, and he said, we're excited to have you. He says, can you get on a plane and make tonight's game? I said, and this is like in the afternoon, this is about 1 o'clock, and I said, hey, well, I got a broken hand, don't you? He says, no, don't worry about it. Woody will cut it off and he'll tape you. And that was the way it was in St. Louis. So I couldn't get a flight to get there in time. He said, okay, we'll just see you tomorrow, because we're playing in Quebec. We're playing in Quebec the next day. And so if I'm not mistaken, then I meet the team, and it's one of those old trades in those olden days. They wanted to save travel, so you usually get traded with the teams that you're in your building. So all I have to do is walk across the rink.
Right.
So I say goodbye to my guys, and I go to the other side. And I'm pretty sure we beat Quebec that night. I think my brother set me up with. I think I got a goal and assist, or a goal and a couple assists. Way sure enough, took my cast off, take me up, and out I went. And I'm pretty sure I scored a goal that game. My brother set me up for that goal. Mm-hmm. I think there's a picture of us on that. But yeah, it turned out, I think we were in last place at that time, and then we won all those games at the end of the season. We got into the playoffs, and obviously we played Quebec the first round, and if I'm not mistaken, we took them out 4 straight, and then we had to play the Montreal Canadiens, and that's where I think we lost in double overtime in the 7th game. And I mean, that was our team in Hartford. Like that was a real good team.
Our guest in episode 9 of the podcast was the magician, Andre Lacroix, the WHA's all-time scoring leader. In the 1980s, he formed a great radio broadcast duo with the legendary Chuck Caton. He recalls those great days in this clip here.
I always said it the way it was. If the Whalers played bad, I said it. If they played well, I said it. Because I knew the people would listen to us, and if they listened to us, I want them to try to visualize what I was telling them. So I didn't want to find excuses. Because too many people that do games today, they're such homers, it's not even fun listening to them.
I agree.
So, and that's why Chuck and I got along so well, because I think, I'm surprised I lasted that long, because I thought that the Whalers at some point might say, either you change, and I think that's what happened at the end, by the way, Mark. The reason I can do the Whalers at the end on the radio is because some of the players complained that I was too negative on the radio, and they decided to go in a different direction.
Well, I think that they were, I recall that very vividly, obviously we had an ownership change. That changed the entire culture of the organization with the Whalers. I don't think they ever really recovered from that. And they were looking for cheerleaders to be the color people. And the thing about you is, once in a while you get under a player's skin. You talk about good cop, bad cop, and that's very accurate, because Chuck was able to play it straight and do his thing well. And you were able to point out things that were positive and things that were negative. And that, as a listener, gave you a real good idea of what was happening on the ice.
I think Chuck loved the fact that I would disagree with him at times on the air, because he had to say it the way it was, and I would bring a different aspect of the game that it happened. So Chuck liked that, because he said that's what the fans, they don't want to hear. They want to hear two different views of what happened on the ice. So I think that, there were so many good times in Hartford, to be honest with you. And I agree with you completely. I think at the end they were looking for cheerleaders that would come and say, listen, we need to be positive about this. But I asked them, when they decided that I was not going to do the radio again, I remember asking them, I said, could you give me one reason why I shouldn't be doing it? Can you show me one letter that you received that was negative about what I said on the air? Could you tell me one phone call you received about something I said on the air that was wrong? And they couldn't come up with anything. So I said, obviously, you're giving in to some of the players that don't like the fact that they're being not criticized, but telling the mistake they made on the ice. I would not criticize the players for what he did. I would just say, well, if you would have back-checked, for example, you could have stopped him, that kind of thing. I was saying, because I knew that a lot of people would watch the game on TV, but turn the sound off and listen to Chuck and I.
Right.
So I want them to make sure that what I was saying is what they saw on TV. So that's why I miss Chuck a lot, because he and I, we got along very well during the radio, and we made a great team together.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the voice of hockey legends. Just a reminder to please consider giving the show a rating and or review on Apple Podcasts. The link is in the show notes. These ratings and reviews help us become a lot more visible and make the show more accessible to hockey fans everywhere. I personally read all the reviews and greatly appreciate them all. If you have thoughts or suggestions for the show, you can contact us through our website at prohockeyalumni.org, or be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Pro Hockey Alumni. Thanks for listening.